So look, you've got yourself this new game and you think, oh, this will be a pleasant, fun, little experience. But then you realize that you got this game and why do my scripts fucking suck? Slay the Spire is fun as hell, and while it's very difficult, a lot of the fun from the game comes from its roguelike difficulty. I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid and taking 70 hours to actually complete it is not the norm. Now laugh at me all you want, but it was a tough ride. From those 70 hours, I learned pretty much everything about this game by myself, and it was one of the most rewarding things I've done. This is why I recommend playing this game to its fullest first, before delving into this guide. Of course, if you just want to watch it for entertainment values, why the fuck would you be watching me? Overall though, this video is meant to cover some of the ridiculous and fun builds that I've used over the course of playing this game. And I recommend you use these strategies if you are mentally insane. Before I begin though, I'll mention that the video will be structured in 4 different parts, for each of the 4 characters. Also, since you can pretty much beat the game up to the 3rd floor with relatively any build, this video will focus on 4th floor strats. And finally, as a little disclaimer, if I hadn't had enough of those already, since this game is so RNG heavy, you can't just pick up one of these strategies and expect to instantly win. That's not how this game works. This should only be used as a framework for your runs, and shows the more intriguing aspects of this game of turning a shitty situation into a fun build. Anyway, enjoy. Before the Watcher update, the Ironclad was my favorite character in terms of style and mechanics. Oh, look at that. The Dark Souls guy likes the strength build. But overall, the Ironclad is still a really fun character in terms of strength builds. And goddamn, I love this character design. Some small effective elements that I usually implement in my builds are the feed card and pretty much eating everything, which is good for tanky builds, an impervious plus body slam combo, which is a great way to block a lot of damage while also dealing a heavy amount at the same time, an upgraded armaments card, which can be useful in the sense that you can upgrade a large portion of your deck, and if you spend a lot of time resting at bonfires, you'll have the opportunity to smith much, so armaments is a good way around this. Sometimes I like to build my deck around strike cards, so that with a few perfected strikes, I could do massive damage. There are other strike cards other than the base ones you start with. There's Twin Strike, Wild Strike, Pummel Strike, and of course Perfected Strike itself, which makes this minor deck build a viable strategy. There are many more small synergies you can make with decks, and it's one of my favorite things about this game, and it's something I could list off for hours, but for now I'm going to cover my favorite build. So I know I've had many disclaimers for this video already, attribute that to my shitty writing, but I also need to clear up that you do not absolutely need every card or relic that I list off. Some cards or relics will be highlighted as more important than others, but keep in mind that this is the ideal build. You won't need to get everything, and you probably wouldn't be able to due to the RNG elements of this game. For cards, you have Flex, which is most effective with a limit break, Anger for bonus attacks, Heavy Blade and Pummel being the 2 most damaging attacks in the build, Spot Weakness and Demon Form, which is almost a necessity, Limit Break, which I recommend adding multiple and upgrading them, Double Tap, Reaper, which can be used for healing, and Inflame. There are plenty of other attack cards that you can use in this run, but having a combo of at least 5 of these skills or powers in one deck can make a really effective strength ramping build that'll only take a few turns to get going. Once you initiate demon form, you could use flex or spot weakness and a limit break to greatly enhance your strength, and if you have another limit break shortly afterwards, you can ramp up your strength dramatically in 2 to 3 turns. This kind of strategy was effective enough for me to easily kill both the 4th floor elites and boss, while no other strategy has proved this effective yet. For relics, you would need the Mutagenic Strength and Clockwork Souvenir combo. The Clockwork Souvenir negates the negative effects of the Mutagenic Strength. Brimstone is not something I used in my build, but seems to be very helpful. The Sling of Courage is an optional 2 starting strength for elite fights. The Duvu Doll is helpful for any amount of curses you have. The Shuriken will be helpful with your anger cards. And the Red Red Skull is very helpful. The Necronomicon is another must-have, because you can do over 500 damage because you duplicated a heavy blade. The Giara is helpful if you have extra rest sites, and there are a few minor damage optimizing relics such as the Pen Nib, the Akabeka, which is incredibly helpful for cards like Pummel, the Paper Frog, and Ginger. There are plenty of other useful relics that can aid you in this run, of course, but these are the ones pertaining to strength or damage buffing. I'm not going to list off every relic in the game because most of them can assist your runs in general, not pertaining to a specific build. While Silent is not a bad character, she is probably my least favorite. There are no sophisticated mechanics or quirks to this character that you can see in any of the other 3 characters in the game. On top of having the worst starting relic, the only viable strategy I've developed is a poison build that got me past the 4th floor, but it wasn't even that good. While there are other fun builds you could create with this character, they won't get you past the final boss. I'll still mention these minor strats out of memory, keeping in mind that I developed these strategies through absolutely no planning and I have no idea what I'm doing. I once had a cool Shiv and discard build that got me to the 4th floor, but didn't win, where I had the Tough Bandages, Tingsha, and the Wrist Blade, coupled with multiple Shiv cards and the Storm of Steel card that let me discard a ton of cards at once, which was made extra effective through the relics I had. I also usually attempt to make good use out of the Alchemize, Phantasmal Killer, and Wraithform cards throughout my runs, always implementing at least a little bit of poison as well. For cards, you'll need Deadly Poison, Poison Stab, Bouncing Flask, Crippling Cloud, Catalyst, which is extremely useful if upgraded and having multiple, Endless Agony, which I recommend stocking up a few before you start using them, Noxious Fumes, which is highly recommended to have multiple, Corpse Explosion, Envenom, which is almost necessary and it makes Shiv's God tier, Wraithform, and Nightmare for duplicating your highly useful cards. If you manage to obtain Envenom, then I highly recommend adding Shiv cards to the top of the list to maximize your poison buildup. Backstab is another good card to obtain with Envenom, and some block cards are recommended as well, but they can be anything. Wraithform should only be used in the most dire situations or when you'll know you'll be able to finish combat in 2 to 3 turns. For relics, I recommend the Snecko Skull, which I didn't end up finding on my run, but it would have been very helpful, the Bottled Tornado to get Noxious Fumes on turn 1, the Specimen, Ninja Scroll for an extra Shiv, and the Twisted Funnel, which is another relic I didn't have on my run, but it would have been helpful. Where do I begin with the Defect? As a glass cannon, this character is definitely fun and has very unique mechanics, which place him to be the toughest to strategize with because I'm not entirely sure how I even beat the final boss with him to begin with. Some really interesting builds that I've ran into, but didn't necessarily beat the 4th floor with, are a build that focused on building a lot of orb slots and focus really quickly, which when combined with the Frozen Core and Loop, along with other things, I was able to build up massive amounts of block within a few turns. Along with this, channeling plasma and doubling your energy is pretty easy, and ramping up Dark Orb to do a lot of damage is another fun mini strategy. For cards, I recommend Echo Form, which is incredibly fun because you can Echo Form your Echo Form to Echo Form more Echo Forms to duplicate 11 cards at the beginning of each turn. Biased Cognition, which is recommended if you can finish combat in 4 to 5 turns. Electrodynamics, Creative AI, and any other power card, especially useful with the unlimited power synergy, which I'll cover later. Defragment, I highly recommend to have multiple of these in your deck. Capacitor, Loop, which I would say is necessary and as necessary as Echo Form. White Noise, Claw, recommending multiple. Static Discharge, Force Field, Double Energy, Blizzard, and Turbo. While some of the other cards at the bottom of the list seem to be minor, they will be helpful with your power deck because you won't have power cards to play every turn. There are also other orb channeling cards you could add to this deck, more block cards as well, but the main theme of this deck is power cards that can stack up tremendously if you play them right. If you play Echo Form first and then play any other power card, you can double the effects of it easily. This is especially helpful for cards like Loop and Defragment and more. If you have the Mummified Hand and Unceasing Top, you'll be able to play cards for quite a while. The only downside of this build is fighting the Awakened one, which is countermeasured by the Frozen Core Relic, which I'll cover in a brief moment. Other of your non-power cards allow you to hold off on playing them during the Awakened one fight as well until a second phase. For relics, I recommend the Data Disk, Symbiotic Virus, Frozen Egg, which will be highly useful for all your power cards, the Bottled Tornado, which can be used to play Echo Form on turn 1, the Emotion Chip, which will be very helpful when you have 7+ orb slots, 3 focus, and ice orbs filling your entire slots, Inserter, Nuclear Battery, Frozen Core, which is almost necessary if you want to countermeasure against the Awakened one, but I mean you can just ignore that too, I guess. The Enchiridion will be helpful for getting at least one more power card. The Runic Capacitor is not entirely necessary if you have the Capacitor card. Unceasing Top, and Ice Cream. So if you get blocked from a 20+ card combo by a curse card, you still have 20 energy for next turn. The Watcher by far is the most overpowered character in the game. With multiple interesting mechanics and insanely useful cards, she is by far my favorite character in terms of cards and mechanics. With the Divinity stance alone, you could get lucky enough to Slay the Spire, even without a concrete build, which is why I'm going to delve straight into the main build I've developed for this character. For cards, I recommend Blasphemy, Diva Form, Devotion, Lesson Learned, Alpha, Brilliance, Conjure Blade, Vault, Collect, especially if you upgrade it, Battle Hymn, Carve Reality, Fasting, which I haven't exactly tested myself, but it seems like it'll be very helpful with Diva Form, Pray, Windmill Strike, Worship, and Prostrate. If you get a majority of these cards together, along with other attack cards like Weave, Just Lucky, Talk to the Hand, etc., you'll be pretty set with dealing enough damage through reaching Divinity every few sets of turns. There are more power cards you can implement into the strat to gain more block when changing stances, and different attack cards that you can use as well. But honestly, the Watcher is so powerful that a majority of her cards are useful if used in the right situations, so it's really hard to limit your choices to only a set amount of cards per build. For relics, there is the Cloak class, which is useful but not entirely necessary, the Violet Lotus and Teardrop Locket, which will be really helpful for getting some extra energy, the Necronomicon, which can be used to disastrous effects if you have Divinity, the Triple Threat combo, the Damaru, which is highly recommended, and the Tornado in a Bottle for turn 1 Diva Form. Now, you may have heard me talk about relic synergies, and here is where I'm going to list them off now. Since all the builds have been covered, I'm going to list off some of the minor, all-encompassing strategies I've developed. The triple threat synergy is the Kunai, Shuriken, and Ornamental Fan, which will be good for any run, especially for the Silent if you have a lot of shivs, and any other build you can make up with a lot of zero-cost attacks, such as with the Ironclad. The Cursed Run is another one of my favorite relic synergies, which I of course didn't make up myself because that's a daily run modifier, but it's the Cursed Key, the Duvu Doll, and the Darkstone Periapt. It's very difficult to obtain all 3 of these early enough in the run and making it viable, but even having a combination of 2 of them is good enough to flood your deck with curses at any opportunity you get. It's optimal to get the Dark Zone Periapt first, before you get any curses. The Cursed Key is optimal after the first floor boss, but can be semi-useful after the second floor, but it is entirely useless after the third floor. The Duvidal is optimal to get anytime, as you don't need to add relics after getting it to receive its effect. This synergy can be made slightly more helpful if you have the Tiny Chest relic, granted you have the Cursed Key to get a few more curses. The Unlimited Power synergy is probably my favorite, which honestly just be the Mummified Hand and it would still be good enough, but it also includes the Bird-Faced Urn and the Enchiridion. This synergy is of course the most effective with decks that have a lot of power cards, such as the Defect build, but it can also be used in effect with the Ironclad in any other class. For some minor synergies, you have the Tough Bandages and Tingsha with a discard deck, the Calipers plus Anchor or Horncleat or Captain's Wheel with an optional of Threaded Needle, which if you have all 5 of those, you're pretty set on block until turn 4. The Mawbank Bloody Idol with an optional Ceramic Fish and Serpent Head will let you literally walk off your wounds. The Blue Candle and Tungsten Rod synergy is probably one of my favorite minor ones, where you make God your bitch, telling him to fuck off as you literally make every curse in the game useless. And finally, the Champion's Belt, Paper Frog, Bag of Marbles with the optional Red Mask. With a full combo of those, you'll start off each combat giving your enemies 2 weak and 1 vulnerable. Aside from this, there are a few helpful relics against the final boss specifically. The Tungsten Rod, as I've already pointed out, on its own can completely negate the Beat of Death buff on the final boss, making the whole fight a hell of a lot less stressful. The Fossilized Helix can be useful if the Heart's first attack is his single attack move that does 45 damage, so you can completely negate that damage if you can't fully block it. It's also easier to do this with the Tungsten Rod because the Beat of Death can remove your Helix Fossil buff. The Lizard Tail is just a revive and can be used well alongside the Fairy in a Bottle. That's about all the strategy I have stored in the dark recesses of my mind. I haven't looked at any other guides or wiki pages. This is all from experience playing the game for the past 3 months. So if there are any other popular strategies I've passed up on, I'm sorry for offending your normie ass. These are my personal strategies and it wouldn't be an interesting video if I talked about popular or common game winning strategies that I know absolutely nothing about. Anyway, sorry for my shitty sarcasm and snarky attitude. I've had to re-record this voice line because my previous recording I had such a scratchy voice and I sounded so unenthusiastic. Basically, it sounded like shit. And I've been working on this video for a few weeks now. So, I'm sorry this took so long to get out and probably not a lot of people are gonna watch it because what the hell is Slay the Spire? Isn't this the guy that made the Yoshi video like 1 year ago? Yeah, I've really fallen far from that, haven't I? Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you beat the game. Hopefully it takes you less time than it took me. I'll leave links to all the graphics and charts I've created for this video in the description. It'll probably lead to a Google Drive folder or something, so you can use them as you like for quick reference. But before I go, and after I wrote the script of this video, I got an epiphany, a beautiful idea of a perfect run. I was doing some art stuff and preparing for the Slay the Spire video, and I got this brilliant idea of doing a run where I'd have a deck that consisted entirely of just 1 anger card. Now, after a very minimal amount of thinking, like I normally do for builds, I decided to wing it. After making the worst mistake of my life, wasting over 3 hours bashing my skull into a brick wall, and overall just going insane, I'm here to talk about the plausibility of having a deck like this. First, I'll cover what you need in terms of cards. Now, you may be thinking, why would you talk about this, you fucking dumbass? Well, for starters, I am a dumbass, but if you think about it, you need to figure out how to get rid of the 11 starting cards of the Ironclad. Not only do you have to get lucky enough to grab the anger card early on in the run, while also not grabbing any other card, which lowers your chances of survival even more, you have to get lucky enough to either obtain the Peace Pipe or the Smiling Mask, or find enough random events to remove enough cards in your deck before the 3rd boss. I don't think this build is good for the final floor because of the Beat of Death and invincibility buff on the boss. You can also obtain the Flex card and maybe another Anger card or any amount of those you want if you're going for the Minimalist or Purity achievements. But other than that, you can't pick up any other cards. There are a total of 41 events you could possibly come across in a Slay the Spire run, 9 of which are events that can remove a card from your deck. That's only a roughly 4.6% chance on its own, but consider the fact that you might only run into 10 or so event rooms in one run. So your chances of getting all 9 of those vents in a single run to remove almost, not even all the cards from your deck you need to get rid of is even lower. Now let's consider the relics you need for a run like this. Arguably the most important relic you need on this run is Unceasing Top, which is the only way you'll be able to infinitely play cards. Next being the Peace Pipe, which could let you remove cards from your deck easier. No other relic is necessary to this run, but others might be helpful. There are 136 non-boss/event/merchant relics you can possibly attain in this game. If you take into account the class-specific relics for other classes, that leaves you with 124 relics you could randomly obtain as the Ironclad. Furthermore, both of these relics are classified as rare relics. Now, the game does not specify the drop rate that varies with rarity, but let's assume that you have a 65% chance of obtaining a common, a 25% chance of obtaining an uncommon, and a 10% chance of obtaining a rare whenever you pick up a relic. Finally, an average Slay the Spire run lands me with about 20 relics. This is counting boss relics, merchant relics, and event relics, but it evens out the odds because of the ungodly amount of relic hoarding I tend to do in my runs. So this number could vary between different people. Taking all this into consideration, you have about a 1.6% chance of obtaining just one of these relics in the run, and theoretically a 0.8% chance of obtaining both in the same run. But fuck it, I'm feeling generous today. Consider the fact that you have a 2% chance for everything to go perfectly. You still need to do 50 attempts before you theoretically have the single run you need to pull this strategy off. I cannot possibly fathom how fucking stupid and also amazing this run is, and I still haven't gotten it yet, after I've literally gone insane typing out the statistics and trying to get it to work myself. So overall, I don't think this strategy is plausible, but it is if you use the Purity card.
This game fucking hates me. This game fucking hates me. I hate this game. But I love abusive relationships anyway. That's it.